All right, guys. So, third part in this little ditty here, this little not ditty, but this long series on the videos that I found interesting, like through my collection and such. I will say that like looking now, you can see like behind me, like yeah, there is like a couple of titles I left up there. So like Badlands, it's a mad, 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 mad world. Dead Man and Matter of Life and Death. I'm not really like interested in reviewing those because if I've already mentioned I think A Matter of Life and Death and Badlands already, but to me it's just like I'm not copping out on you guys. I just found that like for me it's just I kind of slow down my energy level with films that I really don't care about. So I kind of just leave that in the back. So I'd rather talk about stuff that I would most energized and it would make a better video obviously than just talking about shit that I don't want to talk about. So the complete Jacques Tati is a soft recommend, and these are the titles that I'm actually going to put in here that I would just soft recommend and maybe not even recommend at all, because there would be questions about it. I would say like maybe in the comments or what have you. So like it's this all that jazz and Mulholland Drive that I'm going to just briefly discuss here. Um, the complete Jacques Tati is of course, Jacques Tati, famous like French comedian, made Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, Jour de Fête, Mon Oncle, Playtime, and Trafic, all in this box set here. Um, your mileage may vary on like French comedy. This is more of like a sort of breezy kind of taking all the scenery type of films. That's much that it's not really gag 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 gag, right? That would come in like Playtime, albeit it's in like a different format. But um, most people buy this just because of like Playtime is in this set. But I would actually recommend you to view all these like in a streaming format or just some way to break this up compared to like buying the box set because um, Playtime is such a different film compared to like all of the other stuff that to me it's almost like I feel like Jour de Fête and Monsieur Hulot's Holiday is almost like not the same film, but it's like in the same category. But whereas Monocle is kind of different from those, and then Playtime is way different from those. That's why I would, at least like try these films before you buy it. Because for me, when I bought this box set, I was kind of cold on Playtime, and I still am. Um, Although I do find it like a very important cinematic achievement, I don't find it to be a pleasurable one, and that is to me like where um, it needs to be pleasurable, and then the idea is, I guess, like, and maybe cinema doesn't have to be pleasurable, but the way that like he's able to set up the gags and like, okay, one part does this, one part does that, and I don't call myself a passive reviewer. I actually like it whenever you can search for jokes, and but in this case, it's almost like the jokes are like sort of in and out. Like I guess it's not the way that I like my comedy. I do like it kind of straightforward, I guess. And Playtime is just whenever I watched it, I remember being like very pissed off when I watched it because I didn't really think because see here's the great Playtime, here's the great I didn't know the concept of Playtime. And it's litter these jokes and just not hide them per se, but like just have it in a certain period where you can just like look at every single emotion and take the whole thing in. And while you're laughing and enjoying this, there's also funny things going on too. And for a lot of people, Playtime is like their favorite Jacques Tati film, maybe even their favorite film of all time. But I still find it to be kind of just a alienating experience to watch it every single time. But even so, like you may get a lot with Jour de Fête and Monsieur Hulot's Holiday and all that, but and Monocle as well. Monocle, I think it's like probably like my favorite film, maybe close to Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, um, but with that being said, I would just definitely stream these films because they're all so different that you may not like one film or the other. But that's why I would just soft recommend this just because like there's some films that are definitely completely different than the others. But hey, that may be um your impetus to buy this. So all that jazz is one that I completely did not like when I first initially viewed this. I think it was sometime last year. Um, my sentiments are still the same. The actors are all great. There's some great dance choreographers. Oh my gosh, there are great dance scenes in this film, and some of the music is really good too. But the overarching theme of death and how Roy Scheider gives a great performance here as Bob Fosse. Let's get that clear. It is Bob Fosse, not Joey Gideon. It's Bob Fosse that he's playing. And it's just it's one of those things where, okay, you can argue, and I have actually like thought of this. You can argue that because the concept of death is that like the five acceptance, right? I think it's what, like it's bargaining, the five acceptance. I won't go into it here. And he brings this up like with his sort of parody of his own film in Lenny that he had made previous to this film. And I thought about it and I thought, well, okay, if you see it that way, if you see it in like this whole like sort of delirious state of going back and forth through your memories and hallucinations and such, then I can sort of be sympathetic with all that jazz. And that's why I think I sort of recommend it now, is because I could see the ideas of it. But I still kind of think of this film as like a huge ego trip, a huge like, pat on the back to like all the people that he sort of makes life hell for. And I think that his not only his like awareness of it, but his sort of resolve into still being the same character kind of leaves just a bad taste in your mouth. So again, maybe that's what like the whole concept of this film is that it is supposed to be gaudy. It is supposed to be just a completely, just a not a devilish appearance, but almost sort of like a um, maybe a distant one. But I still don't like this film, but it doesn't mean that it's not recommendable. So I would go out and see this, but like if you don't like theater kids, if you don't like the musical aspect of it, and also like the elevation of a guy that is sort of reveling in his own bad behavior that really lived, beware. Getting more controversial here with Mulholland Drive by David Lynch. Um, Here's the thing with David Lynch. I excuse me. I love Blue Velvet actually. I think that's one of the best films in the 1980s. It's a beautiful, surreal meditation of like suburban life and desires, all that such. But whenever it comes to Mulholland Drive, I've been hesitant to really like give this like a really great stance because of the way, because at least like um with previous efforts in Elephant Man and Mulholland Drive, there was an effort here to give these characters like a three-dimensional shape, to give them character and such. And even if like you don't agree with like Twin Peaks or whatever, I do think that in some aspect, like Twin Peaks is when he realized that like, okay, I can make this sort of film that I want to, where it is about like sort of more abstraction, more desire, and that characters don't necessarily matter. So whenever it comes to like, because Lost Highway, I will admit I have not watched, and like I will give that a watch later on, and it made me more sympathetic to this film. But watching Mulholland Drive, it's almost like where we don't know, and yeah, you could put like any theory, any concept to this or what have you. It's really about the dreaming of a dream of a dream. Like that's the most that I could really get out of it. And to me, you could say like this is like the dark side of Los Angeles. This is the dark side of what you would consider like the art of filmmaking. You could put a lot of shit into this and make it work, and I could believe it. But when it comes to me and my own interpretation of Mulholland Drive, I think that this is still a long line of works in the 90s that Lynch had made that just doesn't really define it. Doesn't You don't need definition, and there are films that it doesn't have to make sense, but this does make sense in a concept of where it is sort of dreaming and alternate realities and all that, and we don't know what's going on with it, right? So you could find like this film is like one half a dream and then the other half is reality, but in reality, it really all doesn't make sense, I guess. Um, you could put whatever you want to this movie, but I still think it's just David Lynch's sort of like perversion into making this um, into just something that is not all worthwhile watching. And there's observations that you can make, like I said, about you know about acting and how what the links you'll go to it for, and then also just the dark, like I said, the darkness of Hollywood and darkness of LA. But again, there was just nothing here for me to latch onto, and maybe it's just all vapors, and maybe that's what it was intended to be after all. Okay, so after that's out of the way, so those are the three. So if you disagree with me, that's totally cool. You can leave it in the comments and such. People have done it before. I don't care. Tell me why it's good, and then maybe I'll change my mind. But anyway, so now we get to like the actual like. I'm just going to go through this. So Paul Fehosh's Lonesome, made in 1928. I could make a whole entire series about like the movies in which it was made at like the arguably the peak of America before the stock market crash, where it's all sort of like in this festival setting or New York or what have you. So it's really four films. It's this film, The Crowd, Speedy, which I'll mention later, and Lonesome. Not Lonesome, God. Sunrise, a song of two humans, and that's the best one. And Lonesome is considered like the least important, I guess, out of all those, because like The Crowd was very important. Sunrise, as well as Speedy, is considered like, well, in my opinion, it's Harold Lloyd's best film. But whenever it comes to Lonesome, it's Paul Fehosh as this sort of renegade director, and he would eventually leave the business after King of Jazz, which I'll mention here later. But with this film, it's more of his interpretation of this story of love, and how like modern society sort of tempers with that, and kind of softens it, almost cuts it off in some way. And that's what I think that Lonesome is cool for. There's also some like neat editing tricks, like overlaying, um, something that I love about silent film. So it is definitely one that I would recommend just out of like a historical point. But also, the commentary that was done on this by Richard Kozarsky is also really good and gives a lot more context than I would definitely be able to make into this video. But Lonesome to me is like a long line of these films that were made at a historical point in America's history, and I think that that's really interesting. It is no secret that I love Pasolini, and this is my favorite version of Pasolini is the Trilogy of Life. Three films: the Decameron, the Canterbury Tales, and 1001. Well, Arabian Nights. So this was made in a period where Pasolini had saw his most success. He was at his most, you would say his most, like, he was never content, but he was at his most happiest. There's the Decameron to me is like my personal favorite Pasolini film. It's the best film that I think he ever made. The Canterbury Tales follows that same mold, although it's like very a lot less ambitious, I would say. And Arabian Nights is, you would consider that like a separate film, different to these, but like with Arabian Nights, it also follows this mold of like ambition that the first film did, albeit not as successful, I don't think. But this Trilogy of Life to me is like, if you don't want to like get the huge Pasolini box set, then I would definitely get this, because this is a really good way to like get into Pasolini without having to like go through Salo, which I would never recommend anyone to do. But this Blu-ray box set is so jam-packed with special features, and it'll give you a new appreciation of each of the films. And there's not much I could say about it, but it's Pasolini really at his best and at his peak, in my opinion. And it's unfortunate that we never got any more movies after Salo, because he was definitely a special, one of a kind filmmaker. I'm running out of steam here. All right, so Weekend is considered like Jean-Luc Godard's like last sort of like narrative film where it's I guess important. I don't know, but like with Weekend, it's more satirical. It's like, let's burn everything, let's destroy everything. The bourgeois, like the war that's going on in Algeria, just all this stuff. And to me, it's like it is like a madness sort of work, and one that like I think is a pretty cool movie. I wouldn't say it's like Jean-Luc Godard's best film, but it's definitely one that I would recommend just from like the sheer chaos of it and that it was supposed to do. There's like a long dolly shot, dolly shot that, let me see, it was like about like 10 or 15 minutes, and it's just like frustration. The movie, it is Weekend for sure. And there's not a whole lot to say about it than just to watch it, because it is it is a crazy movie. Gate of Hell by Tenosuke Kinogasa, made in 1953, winner of the Palme d'Or that year. This is a Technicolor marvel, a simply told story of if you choose between the two extremes, you're going to lose every time. You have to have some sort of like like some sort of middle ground. But this is like a beautiful, well done film that I don't think gets talked up a lot about. Ken Ugusa had made a Page of Madness back in 1926, his most famous like silent film about mental illness. But this to me is like not his best film, but I would say like this is one that deserves to be mentioned. One of the cheaper Criterion titles because there is not a whole lot of special features here, but it is one that I would recommend and it's one of the deeper cuts, and it's one that I would just recommend because it's just a very beautifully well told story and beautiful Technicolor. You don't have to hear me say it here, but like City Lights is considered Charlie Chaplin's best film, and for a good reason too. The ending is, you can look at the video and Slavoj Žižek, and like he analyzes the film's ending, and it's absolutely beautiful. Now, with that being said, people kind of forget like the first like hour and a half of this film, which the concept is great. The tramp now in the city is it befriends like a drunken millionaire who gives him all the stuff, and when he sobers up he doesn't remember him, so like there's a lot of comedy that involves with that. But his goal is to help this beautiful girl who is blind to see again, and he tries to collect money to try to pay for her to see. And it's one of the more like beautiful like Chaplin films in that regard. And but I think like there are parts in this film that will make you laugh, make you cry, and everything. And the more that I like, because I'm a huge Chaplin fan, so I have like all of his works except for like the later stuff, like After Modern Times, because I just simply don't care for it. But like whenever it comes to like when he was the tramp, specifically, like people would consider this his peak, and I totally get that. I totally understand it. Definitely go ahead and check this out whenever you can. It is a brilliant work by a guy that people kind of forget about maybe in some ways, because he was the one that like really brought like cinema to this like global forefront. In City Lights, people still remember it to this day, and it probably is his best film. Fantastic Mr. Fox is fun for the whole family. So I love stop motion animation, and this is one of my favorite Wes Anderson films. It's definitely one that, and there's a lot that I skipped over in the collection after that. Like I think I left up Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, and I didn't want to be negative, but like Fantastic Mr. Fox is definitely like one of the better films that he's made. I love Jason Schwartzman's performance as the younger Fox, and George Clooney does great as well. In fact, every voice actor does great in this film. Yeah, I would recommend this film, just to watch, because the animation is just very beautiful and the story is great. It was a really good adaptation of Roald Dahl's story, and that's really all I got to say about it. Love Streams, John Cassavetes' last film he ever made. I'm not considering that last film that he did for Peter Falk as a favor. Like that one, I just totally discount. Love Streams is, to me, I go back and forth on it all the time, because Love Streams is such a mess of a film. And, during this period of time, like Cassavetes found out that he was going to die of liver disease or whatever he had. Like he was alcoholic, so he drank all the time. But he was having like really bad issues at the time. He really didn't know like if he was going to live or die. And I think that really affected the production of this film, whether or not we like to believe it. The guy who did the commentary for this, Michael Ventura, I believe his name is, one of the great commentary tracks that I also have on this, in this collection as well. It's enthralling. He was on the set. He was making a documentary at the time. And for me, Love Streams is like, the first part is so good, the first half, and then the second part kind of just is there. And I really don't know if this is a film that I would really recommend, but as a final send-off for like John Cassavetes, I don't think he could have made a better film, especially like when he knew the circumstances of what was going on at the time. So I would say that like Love Stream, like I go back and forth on it, and I don't really want to spoil anything for you guys. But I still would recommend Love Streams as like a great ending for like Cassavetes' captivating career. All right, my Winnipeg, Guy Maddin, the only Blu-ray in the collection from Guy Maddin. I don't know why, because Guy Maddin is a fantastic filmmaker, is able to merge like surrealism with like the silent film, and that's totally up my alley. So my Winnipeg is his most autobiographical work. It appears in this film as Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and it's so well done. and I think it's like a masterpiece. Like whenever I watch it, it's like one of the best films to watch during like the Christmas, well, the cold season is My Winnipeg. Uh, it's just a very strange film, but it's one that I would watch just to get like more of like a background on the director. This is, you can't go wrong with this film. It is out there. It is wild. It is it really kind of defies all description. I don't know what to define this as. Maybe like you can't even really call it a cinema essay. So it's more of like an autobiographical sort of like weaving in different um, different time periods, the history of My Winnipeg, direct, narrated by Guy Madden. And to me, it's just it's a great movie and definitely a captivating one. Another movie that I would recommend is Moonrise Kingdom, from Wes Anderson. It's probably like the best adolescent film that he made besides Rushmore. Um, Again, one of the examples that I give, I think earlier on, was that like he probably should have been like the John Hughes of his generation, but he just keeps on making these films that people either like or hate. I'm not the biggest Wes Anderson guy, but I've always liked Rushmore and Moonrise Kingdom as a sort of like tales of like adolescence and this sort of like like uncovering and trying to like become into adults. But like in this case, like this is a really cool tale about like two runaways and eventually like the saving of them. Edward Norton plays like a great sort of I'm trying to think of what he was, like a camp counselor, and then yeah, Bruce Willis was in this film too, and he was great. So Moonrise Kingdom is definitely like a great film. Like it's one of my favorite films from Wes Anderson. I would give it a shot. People forget about the Apu trilogy, and I don't know why. Satyajit Ray made this trilogy in the early 1950s, mid 1950s, and it's one of the more naturalistic, more beautiful depictions of India. But it does sort of like give this. I don't know if like where I heard this from, but it gives this impression that like, oh, okay, it's fine to live in poverty and everything, which is it's not. But I like Panther Bacelli, Aparajito, Apur Sansar, like all of these great films, and just like one thing I love Apur Sansar. I think that's one of the great films. Like, and you can mention that about all of it. It's just basically like the life of this young poverty-ridden area, and that this boy grows up in, and eventually becomes an adult. So to me, like Apu trilogy to me is like absolutely wonderful. This was almost destroyed in a fire, like the original negative, and we almost don't get to see this as well. And it's one that like, see, Apu trilogy was so like it was given so much credit at the time, and now like the more time goes on, the more that it just dwindles, and it shouldn't be, because Apu trilogy is a great, like one of the absolute great trilogies in cinema, maybe even the greatest trilogy, man. I'll make that claim. Why not? Like it's I would in terms of like consistency, because these three films are absolutely great. People say that like, well, critics say that like Safety Last is considered Harold Lloyd's best film, where he hangs off the clock. This Speedy to me is his best film, and because it encaptures like what he was about, like this American everyday man, you know, just trying to live life. And the best part of this, well, the story is that he and his father um, is one of the last like carriage riders, I think, and the monopoly is trying to buy him out for lowballing him. And once Harold finds this out and tells the truth, eventually he's just trying to save that, at least, and at least trying to like get him more money. So in this, there's like a lot of great comedy sequences. Harold Lloyd is just great. Like people forget, like Harold Lloyd was, I think, considered at the time like more popular in America than Charlie Chaplin, even though people still saw Chaplin films. Like Lloyd had like the look of just like an everyday person, so he was more like he had more like sway with the American public. So like, um, but either way, like Speedy to me is like the encapsulation of Harold Lloyd's like character, and I do think it is like probably his best film. And one of the films that, like I said prior, in the late 1920s, like people were going through, and um, and this film just encapsulates that period, encapsulates Harold Lloyd, encapsulates like basically like of the time, of course. Inside Llewyn Davis, I love Joel and Ethan Coen, man. Like going back to, I would say, yeah, whenever I was a kid, like Dad showed me like No Country for Old Men and Fargo and all that stuff, and Inside Llewyn Davis is one of their more recent films, made in what was it, 2014, 2013. But they made this film about like it sort of takes inspiration from the folk scene of the late 1950s, and they made it about this guy who's trying to make it big after his partner, his other vocal partner, commits suicide, and he's trying to find his way into the music industry and trying to get famous, I guess. But during this, he loses a cat, and he tries to find that too. And Oscar Isaac's performance as Llewyn Davis, Carey Mulligan, who plays uh, who is I'm trying to remember her name. What was her name? Molly Hunter. That's her name. Carey Mulligan plays this woman that is basically Molly Hunter, and Molly Hunter was probably old at this time, so she couldn't play it, but Mulligan basically plays her in this film, and that may be like the only criticism that you can give it, but it's still effective, and the folk scenes in this, the music scenes are beautiful. One of the more beautiful films, like cinematography wise, well, the look wise of that the Coen brothers made, in my opinion, is this film. Um, you may or may not like the story, and that's the thing. Joel and Nathan Cohen's stories are not like the most satisfying out of all the directors, but I would say that Inside Llewyn Davis is like one of those films, and maybe like one of their best films. I would say that. And this is like No Country for Old Men, Barton Fink, Serious Man. Like Llewyn Davis is up there. I would argue that. So give this a shot, because like I would say that this is like a really really fun and sometimes depressing, sometimes chill experience. But I still think that it's one of their better films that they've made. In 1921, Charlie Chaplin was considered like the best thing about silent films. He eventually made his own feature length film when he was just known for making shorts in The Kid. And during this time, there was so much turmoil in his life. His first wife had divorced. No, yeah, his first wife divorced him, and she had a child that was stillborn, unfortunately. And in this, Chaplin had, had, of course, within his grief, had made this curiosity of like what it could be like if if the tramp had a child instead of myself, and his greatest co-star in Jackie Coogan, who brings out the best in Charlie, and this may be his best movie, and in a line of great movies that he's made, The Kid may be the best because Jackie Coogan like elevates the tramp, and of course the tramp elevates him, and it's really just about the tramp raising this orphan kid that he finds. And to me, it's it's one of the better like Chaplin films that you're going to watch, and at a very brisk like 53 minutes, just clocking under an hour. I think it's it's one of his better films, and I would just recommend it because it really adds like the pathos to a degree that you probably didn't reach that until like City Lights. But it's a different context where this is more adult. This is adult too, but also the relationship between a father and a son. So I think that sort of pathos like affects like different people. It affects me deeply. So definitely like The Kid is definitely go out and see this. It's great. As dense as this work is, A Brighter Summer Day, made by Edward Yang, I think it's about like 4 hours long, some craziness like that. It's been a while since I watched this. It's to me like Edward Yang's one of his finer achievements. Goes back into looking into the Taiwanese and China conflict, where like Taiwan was just looking over their shoulder the entire time, just making sure that that China wasn't out to get them. They had recently split off and just went to this island to get away from the communists, and it's a lot of battling with that, the identity of the country, the identity of the self. It all gets lost upon these gangs and this gang warfare, and just trying to sort stuff out. And A Brighter Summer Day is like an absorbing watch. It's a dense watch. It's really like War and Peace, like Edward Yang's version of War and Peace. And to me, like it's it's definitely one that like requires multiple viewings, which is crazy because it's like a 4 hour film, so you'd think you'd get a lot of it, but it does require a lot. And I do find a great appreciation for A Brighter Summer Day because it is a very different film, even to Yi, which I consider my personal favorite of Yang's films. It is a one of a kind filmmaking experience, and a sad one, and like one of the more like bittersweet endings, and one of the sadder endings you'll ever watch is in this film. But like even so, like I would still recommend this as far as like Edward Yang and being one of the unfortunately, like, he passed away in 2006, and it's just unfortunate that we can't get more films from him because I mean, he made arguably two of the greatest films of all time, and this and Yi, and now he's gone. So it's just like at a very, very young age. So it's just big what ifs. And to me, he probably could have made better films than Yi and A Brighter Summer Day. But hey, if this is what you left as far as your legacy goes, I mean, you did a pretty great job. All right, The New World from Terrence Malick. This is my favorite Terrence Malick film. This is his most narratively narratively. The narrative is the most satisfying out of all of his works, to me at least. It follows like a pretty well reasoned beginning to an end. It features his transcendent filmmaking of like being one with the world, I guess. I'm just generalizing it, but The New World is the story and the most realistic story, and there's some liberties, but like it is a really a retelling of like the story of Pocahontas, and not the Disney version, of course, but the real version. And to me, The New World is like everything that Terrence Malick, like just everything is, nature. Like I'm just reading the back here, but like Christian Bale, um, not Christopher Lee. I'm trying to think, but like Colin Farrell, like everyone does a great job. Even Daniel Thewlis gets a little cameo there. Um, I think that like this film is again like an encapsulation of one director's art, and to me I don't think he got any better with this film. I'm really glad that like the critical reappraisal is like flipping on this, where it's sort of like kind of like forgetting about it. Now it's coming around to being like one of the great masterpieces of all time, and Criterion knew this. So like what they did was that they included all three cuts: the theatrical, the extended, and the remastered or what have you, or the final one. um the extended cut, I think, is like what is the last one here? So like the one that's remastered is the longest one, of course. The theatrical and the extended is not. It's like basically like what the standard definition of that was when it was released originally. But this Criterion, like I would consider it like not a box set, but um, I would go out of your way to see The New World. I would, especially like if you wanted to see like what Terrence Malick's later work is about, because quite frankly, to me, like and you could, and The Thin Red Line, which I'm not the biggest fan of, like you could start with that first and move on ahead, and that's probably the best way. But in terms of like sheer like in terms of like sheer like put together, like you're not as confused, you're not as, I would go with The New World, even though that there's not like the plot isn't really like, it takes its time, it unfolds, and eventually like you understand like what the film is about, not so much as like the story of Pocahontas, but what the story of the world was, of where it's coming to, new possibilities. um and and that's what I really find what's so beautiful about The New World is it's the possibilities of everything, the possibilities of nature, possibilities of violence, just everything. And unfortunately, like we don't have that. And what did Mr. Rogers say? Like we're so much like we're so not perverted, but we're so like captured by like information that we forget to wonder. And that's what I think that like The New World gives, is that wonder that we sort of lose as we become more analytical and more critical. I reviewed McCabe and Mrs. Miller last year. I am more sympathetic to it now because I think that the cinematography itself, I think it's like absolutely just um, excellent. They did the flash where it made the whole region smoky, and with like all the mist like from Vancouver, it just looks beautiful. And it's one of the better looking films that you'll watch. Um, with McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the uh, Warren Beatty and Julie Christie are great in this film. I would say that You could consider this Robert Altman's best film. Now, I'm not so fond of like the latter half of the film because you kind of know what happens, especially in this sort of narrative framework. But the ending scene is beautiful, and the Leonard Cohen music that's behind this really does um, give the movie some sort of like ambient flavor to it that a lot of films really don't have. And I think that McCabe and Mrs. Miller is definitely one to watch out for, as far as like if you wanted to like dive into a trip on Altman. Wells' disciples considered Chimes of Midnight to be Wells' finest achievement. I am really not in that camp. Just because Orson Welles says his best film is this, I'm not going to agree with that. Now, with Chimes of Midnight, the reason why I recommend this film, it's basically about Falstaff, and I think this was based on like a Shakespeare play, and I really cannot remember the title of it. But whenever it comes to like this film, it's it a kinetic like editing and it's really of course based on Shakespeare, so people's like mileage on that may vary. You may not even give a shit about Shakespeare, but when it comes to Chimes of Midnight, there is a really awesome battle scene in this in the middle of it, and I think that that is the reason why to watch this. And you may just watch the scene on YouTube, but I think that that predates like all the action stuff that you would see later on. People would point to like The Wild Bunch by Sam Peckinpah as like the one that really like made people turn their heads like, whoa, dude, like this the possibilities of action just could be like completely different with this editing that Peckinpah has done. Orson Welles probably achieved that in Chimes of Midnight with this battle scene. And there's probably other movies that I haven't referenced this, but like in terms of like film history, this is why I would recommend Chimes of Midnight, is because of that battle scene. And so in this sense, like and the whole film is like about the sort of like the struggle of like male friendships and betrayal and all that. Just the same thing as like a lot of other Shakespeare plays are. But that's why I would recommend this, is just because of the historical aspect of that scene, and that's just something that you may be able to watch on YouTube. But the film is fine in itself, but not to me like Wells's best film. The Decalogue. My first Criterion that I ever got was the Decalogue back in around the pandemic of 2020, and this this whole series is gargantuan. It's really a retelling of like the Ten Commandments. Not really. It's almost like a loose retelling of it, because I think the mistake whenever I first watched this was like, okay, I can just sort of like pick out the commandments in each one. No, not really. It's more deeper. It's deeper than that. So it's about these residents in this housing complex in Poland that was communist at the time, that all had their own problems. It's kind of steeped in mysticism, especially like the first part of this film. And but all of these episodes are beautifully done. They have three-dimensional characters. They are absolutely just breathtaking filmmaking. Many people call the Decalogue Kieślowski's like masterpiece. He never really succeeded it. He made like great films later on, but he never succeeded the Decalogue. I'm kind of inclined to agree, just because some of the episodes in here are just breathtaking. Some of the best stuff you'll ever watch. So like I would recommend the Decalogue for sure whenever you get around to watching it, especially during Christmas time. Especially hits a lot harder. So like I would definitely just go ahead and just get this whenever you can. This deep cut is called The Executioner, or El Verdugo, made by Balarhanga. Damn. Anyway, so like this film is awesome because it's this societal critique of this guy who takes over his in-laws' job as a executioner, but he gets like a nice apartment, a nice money, and all that stuff to live on. But he has to be an executioner when the government calls upon him. So the whole movie is about him just trying to avoid those responsibilities. And I think it's really funny, and I would say this is a great film. This is like I wouldn't say all-time classic status, of course, but like this is a really, really good movie, and I'm glad I picked this up. Yeah, like it's just a really fun satirical critique of like Spain at the time, and I still think it's a really cool movie, and one that it makes me want to watch this guy's movies, because if he can make this, then it makes me really interested in what to see like in the future. But definitely go ahead and check this out on the Criterion channel. Of course, you don't have to buy it, but it's a really deep cut that I enjoyed from Criterion. I'm glad that they released it. So Michelangelo Antonioni had got fame through his not Isolation trilogy, like Alienation trilogy. So like what La Ventura, La Notte, and L'Eclisse. And this is basically the follow up to that. I don't know if he made Red Desert before this or not, but Blow Up is considered his most popular film, with David Lemmings um, the as a photographer that stumbles upon this murder, and he gets involved with it. And there's more to it than that, but it's basically like the meditation of like what it is to be an artist in this culture, and what it really is all about. And that's what I think that Blow Up is about in that essence. Of course, this influenced Blowout, made by Brian De Palma, and the mystery is just very interesting. The ending may not be to like people's taste, but I really do enjoy this film a lot. Like this is my favorite Mike Antonioni film, and a great like time warp, and like where Masculine and Feminine was in 1966 in France, this is 1966 in London, where it was swinging. Like the Beatles were like full on, like they blew up, and it was just a great appearance by the Yardbirds, where Jimmy Page was still in the band. So like a great rendition of like Train Kept It Rolling, and they had to like change the words and all that stuff to it, but you could tell what it was. And the it's just a really cool movie, and of course I would recommend it. Othello, Orson Welles, probably like I go between this and Magnificent Ambersons, but I think Othello is to me like his most perfectly like realized like way in the way that like it's shot cinematography wise. Of course, Othello is the famous Shakespeare play. I don't have to like give you what the plot line is, but like about jealousy, obviously. And I think that the way that he shot this film was great. The locations I think are perfect for this film. I think he shot in like multiple places because he ran out of funding for this film. It's a miracle that this film ever got made. Um, it's yeah, I would say like the look of this, it is sort of reminiscent of Citizen Kane, of course, because he made the same film. But like Othello is much more grandiose, I think, like in its naturalness, I think, and that's why I think I like it, is because the locations are so, they lend itself to this story. It's a really really great film. And he won the Palme d'Or for this, of course. Like he didn't have a country to represent, so he represented, Monaco or Morocco or whatever he was, station, at the time. So it's one of his best films is Othello. I would pick this up. People would criticize the way that like he may like play, because I think the controversy like about Othello is the way that like because the Moor, like he's supposed to be like black, right? So Morrison Wells, like Don's, you would consider it blackface now, and people may have trouble with that. But whenever it comes to like Othello and the way that it was portrayed, he doesn't portray it as like a as this sort of like because people criticize it because the way that Orson Welles plays Othello, but I actually like it because it's his way of emoting of his uneasiness with the situation. And I actually really enjoyed the way people thought that he was kind of tepid because he didn't really want to make like a huge like he didn't want to be like considered like a stereotype, like he was being racist or whatever, because he hated that, of course. But that was the way that you played Othello back in the day. And but I still think that his performance is great. Othello is one of his better films, and I would pick it up for sure. And this is a 2 disc like thing, by the way, of the 93-minute version and the 1955 version as well, with a commentary from Peter Bogdanovich. So definitely check it out. Barry Lyndon is one of Stanley Kubrick's most famous films. This was surprisingly released. Well, when Warner Brothers was releasing like they were releasing Stanley Kubrick's films through Criterion. They're no longer anymore because 4K and all that stuff. But Barry Lyndon is one of his most beautifully shot films. He shot this on just natural candlelight. It makes you feel it makes you feel like you're Batman. It makes you feel like you're you're in the the 1700s or what have you. And Barry Lyndon, you can plot wise, it's probably like the most straightforward, I would say, out of all of Kubrick's works. It's about this he ends up being a trickster, or this like charlatan. But Barry Lyndon goes off and is a mama's boy, and eventually like lucks into like this life of privilege, and eventually becomes like um, this thing in this house, and eventually becomes a tyrant, a horrible person. So to me, Barry Lyndon, you may or may not like the plot. I because I watched this twice, and it's not my favorite Kubrick film. I just think it's just a standard biographical whatever. The performances are really great. I don't think you could have picked a better person than Ryan O'Neal to play this asshole. Like, he was great. But say some people at the end, they found Barry Lyndon to be like a sympathetic character. It never got there for me. So like I just always found it to be like almost sort of like a rise and a fall of a person that I'm typically like not a huge fan of those stories to begin with. But um, because I think Scorsese to me like kind of ruined that for me. But like if I just take this in a vacuum, yeah, it's like a very well told film. But again, your mileage may vary on the main character, which I wasn't really too hot on, and maybe that wasn't the idea of it. It's just but there's so much cynicism in Kubrick's works anyway that it kind of bogged it down for me. So I will only recommend The King of Jazz because Paul Fehosh, like you can tell, like directed some of the scenes in this, but he was fired halfway through production and he basically left Hollywood after that. John Murray Anderson takes the rest of it over. King of Jazz is just a movie review. If you don't know what a movie review is, it's when the when sound came to when it came to motion pictures at the time, this was all the rage. Like it was like watch this and hear the music. People got tired of that because they wanted like an actual story in their movies that they had been accustomed to in the silent period, and they got pretty tired of it. And by the time that all that jazz came out, it was like a Technicolor. You can't even call it Technicolor. It's like this weird like turquoise and red, just like as you see on the cover here. It's just like a very like a curiosity. Like it was, this is where the review died. Like this was considered, like whenever this was coming out, um like the big, this is it, this is going to be like a huge monumental, like this is going to be the movie reviews to end all movie reviews. And it flopped because no one cared, because they were just, get this away, the depression is already here, like we don't want this. And it was so bad that Paul Whiteman, the King of Jazz here, had to like cut his band's salary in half. That's how bad like this movie flopped. And I don't blame them, because like this movie was just like a movie review. It's a curiosity film, like where New York was at the time. But whenever it comes to like this film, I would just recommend this as a curiosity, because it is like one like kind of just a very strange like vaudevillian like movie, and with a weird color. It's just a curiosity recommendation, and I don't know if you can like get this or stream it anywhere else, but like I would still recommend this as like a sort of a curiosity film. But I would take caution, because some of the stuff in here, obviously, like it was the 1930s in America, some racist stuff in it, um, especially like the melting pot number, and sort of like the whitewashing of like where the jazz scene was at the time, with with Chicago and New Orleans, obviously being the hotbeds of that, with like very um, insanely gifted jazz musicians that Paul Whiteman, I don't know if he used or not. I know he was sympathetic to them, but his image is just like, because jazz music at that time was considered more, and the commentary on this is great, by the way, that expounds upon this, but it was mostly just this is considered like jazz is supposed to be like world music, right? It's not supposed to be like this regional thing. It's supposed to be like this. Jazz is a different term in this compared to like what was going on in American regional things at the time. So if you look at it as that, then yeah, you'll understand it more. But yeah, if you look at King of Jazz, who the hell's Paul Whiteman? He ain't Miles Davis. He ain't John Coltrane. Then yeah, you're going to really hate this. But if you see it in that context, then you'll understand. All right, Women in Love, Ken Russell. You guys know how much like I don't really like The Devils that much, but Women in Love is where like Ken Russell I really like this movie. It's a really good adaptation of D.H. Lawrence's novel of the same name. Um, what's her name? She won the best. She won the best actress um, for this movie. But it is like really the study of like how people can really love one another, in their own backgrounds and their own. And it's interesting that D.H. Lawrence had made this like into like an aristocracy sort of like this high privilege sort of style, but because their lives are so, like, I don't know, needlessly complex or what have you, that the love that they experience is not so much as it's kind of cold, and not, and more than that, it's also like well, it's also fine, but like homosexual as well, you know. So like different ways that people love, and it's really studied in this film. There's some stuff that Russell gets away with this, that in the way that he's able to like shoot his scenes and make it a little bit more experimental, that I wasn't really too fond of. But I say that the acting in this and the overall idea of it, of women in love, I think is very interesting, and that's why I would recommend this. And there's also like a commentary with Ken Russell on this, that he makes more comments on it. So like, yeah, I would recommend this for sure. So The Color of Pomegranate is a film by Sergei Parajanov. Parajanov. He had made Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, I think about like 4 or 5 years. No, 3 years prior. And so when he made this, people were pissed off. They did not like the poetic directness of it, which people still don't like. It's about a poet named Sayat Nova, who is this poet from Armenia, sort of Russian territory, where Parajanov is on. And he made this poetic sort of cinema, which is still striking to me, because it's almost like we were transported into the 1700s. Like, that's how well he was able to make these, to design these scenes or what have you. And apparently it was like a nightmare in production, because for budget costs and all that stuff. And unfortunately, we still don't have like the full cut of this, because like that's been lost, and so we only have like 78 minutes of this. I think The Color of Pomegranates is everything that it is. It is absolutely like a beautiful film. It's one of the greats of all time. Like Sergei, one of the great cinema tragedies is Sergei Parajanov just was a complete rebel, and he paid for that with his life, basically. And with Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, and Color of Pomegranates, we have these two one of a kind great films of all time to remember him by. And now your mileage may vary with, like, you know, these art, like, I would say this is his more like harder art film, like with this, and you may not like the sort of things. Some people don't even like the transfer of this film, but I think that like Tony Raines gives a great commentary on this that will be able to just unpack it all for you. And I think that if you watch it with the commentary, it will make a whole lot of sense. And where, as you first see the film, is this sort of like curiosity of like, what is going on here? You will be able to know a lot more when Tony Raines tells you. So like, of course, like, put in your own thoughts first, of course, but like whenever it comes to like the deeper meanings and symbolism and all that, then you know you would be able to view it. But Color of Pomegranates, a masterpiece, in my opinion, Sergei Parajanov. One of the most frustrating films that I've ever had the pleasure of watching is The Tree of Life, because this should have been Terrence Malick's masterpiece. And the reason why and I would still recommend this, because this is about just the life of a young boy and a man, and is reflecting on that, basically. And the there is a scene after, which we already, at the beginning of the film, it's like there is a way of nature and there's a way of grace. So we already know of the film's thesis, that what this film is going to be about, at least one of the ideas. And so after this, we get these beautiful scenes of like Brad Pitt and the kids, and it's just wonderful. Then we go to the creation of the world, and this opera music that is played on top of it, that is kind of grating to me, at least. And I love music, but I have never heard that opera before. I know that Malick is like a huge like music guy, and I am too, but not in opera, and that's where I need to like really get clear on. But that was grating to me. And then the worst part of it is whenever we and there's like in the scene, it's like life being born or whatever like that on the planet, and eventually we get to two dinosaurs. And this is where, like, you know, I kind of just was, and this is what like divides people, right? So when you get to this scene, the dinosaurs fight, one almost kills it, puts his foot on its head and just looks at it and walks away, right? It showed him mercy, which is what we, way of nature and the way of grace, right? The grace is one of the things in life, okay? Okay, so we already know that from the beginning of the picture, because Jessica Chastain has told us that, you know, it's these two ways, right? if you would have cut out, in my opinion, a overly long, I wouldn't call it pretentious, I won't use that term, but I would call it like indulgent. If we were able to cut out that part just because you wanted to use the guy from 2001: A Space Odyssey to do like the special features and all that stuff, I know I'm being negative, but I have to give out about this. Why would you use that scene? Like, why would you? It's almost like he put it in there just because he did not know what to do. Because if this was a film about Brad Pitt, Jessica Chastain, and the kids, and some of the best child acting you're going to see in a film, this would have been his masterpiece. This would have been his like his mirror, his personal take on the world, and the wonder of it all, right? And people don't even like the Sean Penn scenes as him as an old man, but I actually really liked it. Like I think that that gave sort of life into it, and sort of the emotion to it. Um, Now that's all the spoilers I'll give for it. It's like the first like 30 minutes of the film. Um, I hated that part. I think it added nothing to it. See, people will debate me on this, and I've talked to people a lot about this film, and they said that like, look, dude, it's fine. Like it's just a part of the film. Like I don't know why you're so hung up on this part. And I just replied because it's just a simple repeat of the like I am smart enough I think to know that I didn't need a dinosaur reinterpretation of what was already told to me. Yeah, it's like a perfectly succinct like sentence. There's a way of nature and a way of grace. That's it. Like we didn't need to know, and we already got that thing later with Brad Pitt and the child. So we got not only one example with the stupid dinosaurs, but another example which is much more meaningful, I think, because we're humans and we understand. Um, because like the father and the child are at odds with each other, and that's a way of nature. So, to me, I guess like what I and I may have made the case right there and then, but at this point, and because and Jessica Chastain as the mother is supposed to be the way of grace. And so like you didn't need this whole pointless like dinosaur exercise to really make your point is what I'm trying to get at. And yes, I know it's only a short part of the film. And with all these extras in it and with all this stuff here because there's an extended version of this by the way too, or a different version. And they still didn't cut out the fucking dinosaur scene. I'm sorry, man. Sorry, guys. So like I hate it so much because if there is a fan version out there that edits out the whole entire dinosaur thing, then I will totally like love this movie. I will call it his masterpiece. I will bow at the altar of Terrence Malick. But because of the dinosaur, and you guys tell me if I'm just being stupid about this, and maybe there's like a bigger like thing about it that because I know that that scene also mirrors where like the boy calls Brad Pitt's his father out on it, and that sort of mirrors it. But that's the only thing that I could think of. Um, anyway, I would recommend this film. I would recommend this film because like the rest of the film is absolutely beautiful, and I think it's like some of Terrence Malick's best stuff. But but I would say that like the New World, I think is like a much better film, and yeah, that's I'll stop here and I'll just move on to the last film, Magnificent Ambersons. Orson Welles, I won't be able to top that Tree of Life thing. I'm sorry. Magnificent Ambersons, probably Orson Welles' best film, even with the cuts, like Rosenbaum says in the commentary here. Um, we don't. If you don't know the story, RKO basically took the final cut from Orson Welles and cut it up to their own liking. Even Robert Wise, the famous director of The Sound of Music and what have you, um, I would say probably elevated his career by doing it. Um, I would also state that like it's his most autobiographical work, Orson Welles, and Tim Holt plays a great spoiled brat in this film. He's so good. People hate him, but I love his performance in this. It's great. It's like central to the film, of course. Um, it's one of the biggest again one of the biggest um, crimes of film is that Magnificent Ambersons doesn't have the full cut. Last time I heard, people are going to Brazil where Orson Welles was working on the film and sent it to RKO was going to find it. But if Orson Welles, like even at that point in the 70s, was already revered, like he knew that like the film was basically gone and it's not his work, then we can basically just come to the realization that there's probably not going to be one. Now people found Metropolis, so like things can show up in weird places, but I really doubt people are going to find the Magnificent Ambersons cut. Otherwise, like I'm going to be totally over the moon about it. But in this case, it's probably not going to happen. So Magnificent Ambersons, to me, it's a great film, even with the cuts. I think, yeah, like the second part of it, it does get bogged down by it, but I still love the idea of this family and modernity, and is eventually decayed away. Very sad, but I mean, it's done in a Wellesian way, which is very eloquent. So anyway, Magnificent Ambersons, definitely check that out, and this is like the third part of the shelf. I'm going to cut all these videos up, by the way, in like 30-minute batches, because I know that the hour stuff like kind of gets taxing on people. So I'll definitely just like shorten these up. So there'll probably be like 4 videos in like these 2 shelves that I've done. But anyway, thank you guys again. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate your guys' support. Thank you so much.